When the private investigator called me at 3 in the morning, I knew something had gone terribly wrong, but I never imagined the words that would come through that phone. "Mrs. Patterson, we need to talk about your daughter." Not my husband, my daughter. I sat up in bed, the silk sheets sliding off my shoulders. Beside me, Marcus slept soundly, his breathing deep and even. The man I'd been suspicious of for months, the man I'd hired someone to follow, was right there, innocent at least for now. But Emma? My Emma? What about my daughter? I whispered, walking out into the hallway, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. "Ma'am, I think we should meet in person. There's something you need to see." Let me back up because none of this makes sense without understanding how we got here. My name is Victoria Patterson, and for 23 years I thought I had built something solid. A good marriage, a beautiful daughter, a life that looked perfect from the outside, the kind of life you see in holiday cards and Sunday brunches. Marcus and I met in college. He was studying business. I was in early childhood education. We were the couple everyone said would make it, and for a long time we did. He built his commercial real estate firm from nothing, working 18-hour days for years. I taught kindergarten until Emma was born, then stayed home to raise her properly. Emma. God! Just thinking her name used to make me smile. She was our miracle baby. We tried for 5 years before she came. When the nurse placed her in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapping around mine, I made a promise. I would give her everything, every advantage, every opportunity, every ounce of love I had. And I did. Piano lessons at 4, private school, summer camps in Europe, a college fund that could have bought a small house. When she got into Northwestern, Marcus cried. When she came home with her degree in marketing, we threw a party for 100 people. She was 24 now, working at a boutique consulting firm downtown, still living in our guest house, which we'd renovated for her, her own space, but close enough that we could still have family dinners twice a week. Those dinners were everything to me. Wednesday and Sunday like clockwork. I'd cook her favorites: herb-roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, the apple pie she'd loved since childhood. We'd sit around our dining table, the one Marcus and I had picked out together in our 2nd year of marriage, and we'd talk. About work, about life, about her plans. Or at least I thought we talked. The suspicions about Marcus started small. It was February when I first noticed. He started coming home later, not by hours, but by 20-30 minutes. Small gaps that might mean nothing. He'd started dressing differently too, wearing cologne I hadn't bought him, keeping his phone face down on the table during dinner. "Just work stress," he'd say when I asked. "The Harrison deal is killing me." But there were other things. Charges on our credit card I didn't recognize. A woman's laughter in the background, once when he called from the office. The way he'd started taking calls in his car, even in our own driveway. I tried to ignore it. Tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, that 23 years of marriage had earned him the benefit of the doubt. But the doubt grew louder, keeping me up at night, making my coffee taste bitter in the mornings. By April, I couldn't take it anymore. I found Chapman Investigative Services online, a discreet firm with good reviews, the kind that promised confidentiality and results. The woman who answered the phone had a kind voice, the sort that suggested she'd heard this story 1,000 times before. "We can help you find peace of mind," she'd said, "one way or another." I met with David Chapman in person, in a coffee shop in a neighborhood where no one knew me. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't judge me when I handed him Marcus's schedule, his office address, the name of the woman I suspected, Melissa Chen, his new junior partner. 2 weeks, he said. That's usually all it takes to establish a pattern. I paid him half up front, cash, from money I'd been skimming from our household account. Money Marcus never noticed was gone, which somehow made the whole thing worse. That was 3 weeks ago. For 21 days I waited. I went through the motions of normal life, cooking, cleaning, smiling at family dinners. Emma asked me twice if I was feeling okay. Marcus asked once, absently while checking his phone. Just tired, I told them both. David checked in periodically with brief texts. Nothing unusual yet, or maintaining surveillance. I'd started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, waiting for the message that would either destroy my marriage or let me breathe again. But when that call came at 3 in the morning, it wasn't about Marcus at all. I met David at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where the coffee is terrible, but no one asks questions. He was already in a corner booth when I arrived, a manila envelope in front of him, and an expression on his face I couldn't quite read. Not pity. Something heavier than that. "Mrs. Patterson," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "I'm going to be direct with you, because there's no easy way to do this." I nodded, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup I hadn't ordered, but the waitress had brought anyway. "We've been following your husband as requested. He's clean. Working late, yes, but at the office. The woman you mentioned, Ms. Chin, their relationship is strictly professional. I have photos, timestamps, everything. He's not cheating on you." The relief that should have washed over me never came, because David's face was still grave, and that envelope was still unopened between us. "Then why are we here?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. "Because of this." He opened the envelope and slid out a series of photographs. Mistakes. The first photograph showed Emma's BMW, the one we'd bought her for graduation, parked outside a downtown office building I didn't recognize. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. from 4 nights ago, Wednesday, the night she'd told us she was working late on a campaign pitch. "Keep looking," David said quietly. The second photo showed Emma getting out of the car, but she wasn't alone. A man emerged from the passenger side, tall, maybe mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit. Even in the grainy nighttime photo, I could see his hand on her lower back as they walked toward the building entrance. "Who is he?" My voice sounded strange, distant. "His name is Richard Castellano. He's a real estate developer. Married. 3 kids. David pulled out another photo. "He's also one of your husband's biggest clients." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the coffee cup harder, feeling the heat burn through the ceramic into my palms. "There's more," David continued, and his tone made me want to run. "We started following them after we spotted this. That was 5 days ago. Mrs. Patterson, this isn't a recent thing. They're careful, but not careful enough." He laid out more photos like a poker hand I was destined to lose. Emma and Richard at a restaurant in the suburbs, tucked into a dark corner booth. Emma leaving a hotel in Evanston at dawn, the same clothes she'd worn the day before. Richard's hand in her hair. Her smile, that bright, beautiful smile I'd seen across 1,000 breakfast tables, directed at someone else's husband. "How long?" I asked. "Based on credit card records your daughter used, we ran a background check with your permission. Remember, at least 8 months. Probably longer." 8 months. While she sat at my table eating pot roast and talking about her career. While she hugged her father goodnight and borrowed my jewelry for work events. While she looked me in the eye and asked if I was feeling okay. "There's something else," David said, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of that phrase. Something else. As if this wasn't enough. He pulled out a printed spreadsheet. "We found irregularities. Large cash deposits into your daughter's personal account. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. Always in amounts just under the federal reporting threshold." I stared at the numbers, my education degree suddenly feeling worthless. "I don't understand." "Mrs. Patterson, your husband's firm handles major commercial deals. Inside information about zoning changes, upcoming developments, property acquisitions. That information is worth a lot of money to the right people." The words hit me like cold water. "You think Emma is selling information from her father's company?" "I think Richard Castellano has been paying your daughter for access to your husband's business intelligence." and I think she's been stealing it from his home office. I don't remember driving home. One moment I was in that diner, surrounded by the smell of burnt coffee and David's sympathetic eyes, and the next I was sitting in my car in our driveway, watching the sunrise paint our house in shades of gold and pink. Our house. The house Marcus had bought 20 years ago, when his firm first started making real money. The house where we'd raised Emma, where her height marks were still penciled on the kitchen doorframe, where her baby photos lined the hallway in expensive frames. The guest house lights were off. Emma was sleeping, probably, in the custom-designed space we'd created for her, sleeping soundly the way only people without conscience could. I sat there until 7 o'clock, until I saw Marcus's bathroom light turn on. Then I went inside, climbed the stairs, and stepped into our bedroom like I was walking through water. "Hey, babe," Marcus said, emerging from the bathroom with his toothbrush in hand. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep." He was wearing the pajama pants I'd bought him for Christmas, his hair still messy from the pillow. My husband of 23 years, who'd never cheated, who'd built an empire through honest work, who trusted the wrong people. "Marcus," I said, and something in my voice made him stop mid-brush. "We need to talk." I didn't show him the photos right away. First, I made coffee, his favorite dark roast, the expensive kind we bought from that little shop downtown. I poured it into the mug Emma had given him for Father's Day 2 years ago, the one that said "World's Best Dad" in her handwriting. We sat at the kitchen island, the marble cold under my elbows, and I told him everything. About hiring the investigator, about the surveillance, about what David had found. Marcus didn't interrupt. He just sat there, his coffee growing cold, his face draining of color as I laid out each photo on the counter between us. Emma and Richard. Emma at the hotel. The spreadsheet with the deposits. When I finished, the silence was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking above the stove, the birds starting their morning songs outside. "No," he finally said. "No, Victoria. There has to be a mistake. Emma wouldn't." "Look at the photos, Marcus." "I am looking." His voice cracked. "I'm looking at our daughter with some man. Yes, but that doesn't mean corporate espionage? Stealing from me? That's insane. Emma loves us. She would never." "The deposits started 9 months ago," I said, keeping my voice steady even though everything inside me was screaming. "Right around the time you brought Castellano on as a client. Right around the time you started bringing work home more often, leaving your laptop in your office here at the house. Lots of people bring work home. Your office is in the main house, Marcus. Emma has a key. She has the alarm code. She could walk in any time." I watched him process this, watched the realization move across his face like a shadow. His daughter, our daughter, had access to everything. His files, his computer, his client lists, his deals. We'd given her that access because we trusted her, because she was our child. "We need to talk to her," he said finally. "Right now. There has to be an explanation." But I shook my head. "Not yet. David is still gathering evidence. If we confront her now and we're wrong. If we're wrong." Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped against the tile. "Victoria, you're talking about our daughter like she's a criminal." "I'm talking about our daughter like she's a 24-year-old woman who's been lying to us for months." The words hung between us, sharp and undeniable. Marcus stared at me like I'd slapped him, and maybe I had. Maybe we both needed to be slapped awake from whatever dream we'd been living. "I need more proof," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Before we accuse her of this, I need to be absolutely certain." "Then we wait," I said. "We act normal. We watch. And we don't let her know anything has changed." It was the hardest thing I'd ever agreed to. That Sunday dinner was torture. I made Emma's favorites, the same meal I'd been making for 24 years. My hands moved through the familiar motions, peeling potatoes, seasoning the chicken, rolling out pie crust, but everything felt wrong. The kitchen that had always been my sanctuary felt like a stage set, and I was an actress playing the role of mother. Emma arrived at 6, right on time, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a sundress I'd helped her pick out last month. She kissed my cheek, and I had to force myself not to pull away. "Something smells amazing," she said, setting the wine on the counter. "Is that your rosemary chicken?" "Your favorite," I said, and my voice sounded almost normal. Almost. Marcus came down from his office a few minutes later. I watched him look at Emma, really look at her, like he was seeing a stranger wearing his daughter's face. But he smiled, hugged her, asked about her week. "Crazy busy," Emma said, settling into her usual chair at the dining table. "We're pitching a new client on Friday. Tech startup, really innovative stuff. I've been at the office until midnight most nights." Midnight. I thought of the photos, the timestamps. Wednesday at 11:47 p.m. She'd been climbing into Richard Castellano's car, not working at any office. "That's my girl," Marcus said, and I heard the hairline crack in his voice. "Always working hard. I learned from the best." Emma smiled at him, that radiant smile that had charmed teachers and relatives and apparently married men with money to spend. I served dinner and we ate. Emma talked about her work. Lies, all of it, I realized now. She'd been lying so smoothly, so easily for so long. When had it started? When had her daughter learned to look us in the eye and deceive us? "Mom, you okay?" Emma asked, and I realized I'd been staring at her, my fork suspended halfway to my mouth. "Fine, sweetie. Just tired." "You've been saying that a lot lately." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were warm. Her nails, painted the pale pink I'd always told her looked lovely against her skin tone. "Are you sure you're feeling all right? Maybe you should see Dr. Morrison." The concern in her voice sounded so genuine. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't seen those photos, I would have believed her completely. "I'll make an appointment," I lied, and wondered if this was how it felt for her. If lying had become so natural that the words just flowed like water. After dinner, Emma helped me clear the dishes, another family ritual. We stood side by side at the sink, her washing, me drying, just like we'd done since she was tall enough to reach the faucet. "Dad seems stressed," she said casually, scrubbing a plate. "Is everything okay with the business?" And there it was, so subtle I might have missed it before. The fishing, the probing, looking for information. "You know your father," I said lightly. "Always worried about something. The Castellano deal has been taking up a lot of his energy." I watched her face carefully. Just the slightest flicker, a tightening around her eyes, a pause in her washing rhythm. Then it was gone, replaced by that easy smile. "Richard Castellano, right? The developer? I think I met him once at Dad's office party." She was good. So good. But I was her mother. I taught her how to lie about broken vases and stolen cookies. I knew all her tells, even the ones she thought she'd outgrown. I said non-committally, putting away a plate. "Big client. Important to the firm." "Well, I hope it works out," Emma said, draining the sink. "Dad deserves success. You both do, after everything you've given me." She dried her hands and hugged me, and I hug her back, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. This girl I'd grown inside my body. This girl whose first word was "Mama," and whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, and whose nightmares I'd chased away. When had I lost her? Or had I ever really known her at all? After Emma left, Marcus and I sat in his office, door locked, voices low. "I want to check my computer," he said. "See if there are any signs of access." "Will you be able to tell?" "Maybe. Probably not if she's careful. But I need to look." He opened his laptop, the one he kept on his desk at home, and started going through files, checking timestamps, access logs. I watched over his shoulder, not understanding half of what I was seeing. "Here," he said suddenly, his finger on the screen. "This file, the Castellano zoning documents. I haven't opened this in 2 weeks. But someone accessed it Thursday night at 11:34 p.m. Thursday night, the night Marcus had been at a business dinner. The night I'd gone to bed early with a headache. The night the house had been empty except for Emma, who had a key, who knew the alarm code, who knew exactly where her father kept everything. She could have just been curious," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe she was just—" "Marcus." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Stop." He closed the laptop and put his head in his hands. In 23 years of marriage, I'd seen him cry 3 times. When Emma was born, when his father died, and when his company almost went bankrupt in 2008. This would be the 4th time. "How could she do this to us?" he whispered. "We gave her everything." "I don't know," I said, "because I didn't. Because maybe that was the problem. We'd given her everything, and somehow that had become nothing at all." I called David Chapman the next morning from my car, parked in the grocery store lot where no one could overhear. "I need you to find out everything," I said. "How long it's been going on, what information she's sold, how much money she's made, all of it. That's going to take time, and it's going to cost more. I don't care what it costs." 3 days later, David called me back to the diner. Same booth, same terrible coffee, but this time the envelope was thicker. "You're not going to like this," he said, which seemed to be his opening line for every conversation we had. He spread out a timeline on the table, printed emails, bank statements, phone records, everything cross-referenced and color-coded, like evidence for a trial. "It started 11 months ago," David began. "Your daughter met Richard Castellano at your husband's office holiday party, December 16th. They exchanged numbers under the pretense of networking. She told him she was interested in learning about real estate development." I remembered that party. Emma had worn a green velvet dress. She'd charmed everyone, working the room like she'd been born to it. Marcus had been so proud. By January, they were meeting regularly. Coffee, lunch, drinks after work. He's smooth, Mrs. Patterson. Older, wealthy, powerful. He made her feel special, important. Made her feel like she deserved more than what she had. More than what she had. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "We gave her everything." "I know. But guys like Castellano, they're good at making people feel like they're not living up to their potential. Like they're owed something." David tapped another document. By February, the relationship became physical. And by March, he made his first request. For information. Started small. Asked about your husband's schedule, which clients he was meeting with, general market trends. Innocent-seeming questions that Emma probably didn't think twice about answering. He pulled out a bank statement. Then in April, the first deposit. $5,000. He told her it was a gift, that he wanted to help her start investing in real estate herself. I looked at the numbers, feeling sick. But it wasn't a gift. No, it was payment. And once she took that first payment, she was in. Within a month, she was accessing her husband's files regularly, photographing documents, forwarding emails. "Look at this." He showed me phone records, hundreds of texts between Emma and Richard. Most were coded, careful, but some were explicit enough. "Got the Highland Park files. When can we meet?" "Thursday. Usual place. You're amazing, baby." "Dad, closed the Evanston deal today. Signing Friday. Perfect. That's worth $15,000 to me. To us." I read through them, each message a small knife wound. David kept talking, laying out the scope of it. How Emma had been systematically stealing information about her father's deals, his clients, his strategies. How Richard had been using that information to swoop in on properties, to undercut Marcus's clients, to position himself advantageously in negotiations. Your husband's firm has lost at least 4 major deals in the past 6 months, David said. Deals that went to Castellano instead. At the time, Marcus probably thought it was just bad luck or normal competition. But it wasn't. His own daughter was sabotaging him. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. How much has she made? David pulled out a final statement. Including the first $5,000, Emma has received $87,000 in cash payments over the past 8 months, all deposited in amounts under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting. $87,000 while sitting at our table, while hugging her father goodnight, while asking me if I was feeling okay. There's more, David said, and I wanted to laugh again at that phrase, except nothing was funny. Castellano is in financial trouble. His last 3 developments went south, and he's leveraged to his eyeballs. He needs one big score to stay afloat. Let me guess. He's got his eye on one of Marcus's deals. The Riverside project. 200 acres of prime commercial development. Your husband's been working on it for 2 years, negotiating with the city, lining up investors. It's the biggest deal of his career. I knew about Riverside. Marcus talked about it constantly. It was his legacy project, the one that would establish his firm as a major player. He'd been pouring everything into it. When does it close? I asked, though part of me already knew. The city council votes on the zoning variance in 2 weeks. Once that passes, Marcus can move forward with investors. But if someone else submitted a competing bid with insider knowledge of his proposal, of his investor list, of his margins, they could undercut him and steal the entire project. David nodded. And I think that's exactly what Castellano is planning. Emma accessed your husband's Riverside files 3 times in the past week. She's been photographing documents, copying proposals. Everything Castellano would need to craft a competing bid. I sat back in the booth, feeling the weight of it all pressed down on me. My daughter wasn't just having an affair with a married man. She wasn't just stealing information for extra money. She was actively destroying her father's career, his legacy, everything he built. Why? I asked, not expecting an answer. Why would she do this? I've seen this before, David said quietly. Kids who grow up with everything sometimes develop a strange resentment. They feel entitled to more, always more. And when someone like Castellano comes along and offers them a taste of adult power, of being seen as an equal rather than a child, he shrugged. They make terrible choices. I drove home in a daze, David's envelope on the passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. I had evidence now, undeniable, documented proof of what Emma had done, what she was still doing. The question was, what came next? I could confront her directly, watch her crumble or deny or lash out. I could go to Marcus and let him handle it. I could go to the police. What Emma had done was criminal after all. Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets. I could destroy my daughter's life with a single phone call, but she was destroying ours first. When I pulled into the driveway, Emma's car was there. She was in the guest house, probably living in the space we'd built for her, sleeping in the bed we'd bought, eating food from our refrigerator. I sat in my car and watched her windows. A light was on in her bedroom. I could see her shadow moving behind the curtains, talking on the phone, probably. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Hey, Mom, can you come over? Want to talk to you about something. My heart stopped. Did she know? Had she somehow found out about the investigation? I texted back, be there in 5. I grabbed David's envelope and walked across our perfectly manicured lawn to the guest house. Emma opened the door with a smile, wearing yoga pants and an old Northwestern sweatshirt. She looked young, innocent, like the daughter I thought I knew. Hey, come in, she said. Want some tea? Sure, honey. I followed her inside, the envelope feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She moved around her little kitchen, the one we'd renovated with granite countertops and custom cabinets, making chamomile tea like we'd done 1,000 times before. So, she said, handing me a mug, I wanted to talk to you about something kind of important. I sipped the tea, waiting. Emma sat down across from me at her small dining table, the one we'd found together at an antique shop last summer. She wrapped her hands around her mug, and for a moment she looked like she was 12 again, asking permission to go to a sleepover. I've been thinking a lot about my future, she started, her voice soft. About where I'm going, what I want. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. And I think it might be time for me to get my own place. Like really my own. An apartment downtown, closer to work. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I love being here, and you and Dad have been so generous, but I'm 24. I should be more independent. Independent. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. She wanted independence, bought with money stolen from her father. That's a big step, I managed to say. I know, but I've been saving, and I think I can afford something nice. Maybe in River North or the West Loop. She took a sip of tea. I was actually hoping you and Dad might co-sign a lease for me, just until I build more credit history. The audacity of it stole my breath. She was sitting here, asking us to help her move into an apartment she was buying with blood money, money earned by betraying us. And she was asking with such sincerity, such sweetness, that if I didn't know better, I would have said yes without hesitation. Emma, I said carefully, that's a lot of money. Rent downtown isn't cheap. I know, but my salary is good, and I've been really careful with my finances. Another lie, smooth as silk. Plus, I think it would be good for me. You know, spreading my wings. I looked at her across the table, my daughter, my only child. The girl I'd rocked to sleep and taught to ride a bike and helped with homework. When had the lying started? Had there been signs I'd missed? Or had she always been this good at deception? And I'd just been too loving, too trusting to see it? Let me talk to your father, I said finally. Thanks, Mom. She reached across and squeezed my hand. I knew you'd understand. You've always understood me. The words hurt more than she could know. I waited until Emma left for work the next morning before I went to Marcus's office. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen, but I could tell he wasn't really seeing it. She asked us to co-sign a lease for an apartment, I said from the doorway. Marcus looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes broke my heart. He'd barely slept in days. Neither had I. Of course she did, he said bitterly. Why not? She's already taken everything else. I closed the door and sat down across from him. David sent his final report. It's worse than we thought. I laid it all out, the timeline, the amounts, the Riverside project, everything. Marcus listened in silence, his jaw clenching tighter with each revelation. 2 weeks, he said when I finished. The council votes in 2 weeks, and if Castellano submits a competing bid, he'll destroy you. He'll destroy the firm. 20 years of work, Victoria. 20 years of building something, of establishing relationships, of earning trust. His voice cracked, and our daughter handed it all to him for $87,000 and the attention of a man old enough to be her father. We have to stop her, I said. We have to stop both of them. How? If we confront her, she'll just deny it. Or she'll warn Castellano and he'll cover his tracks. If we go to the police... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. If we went to the police, our daughter would go to jail. Corporate espionage carried serious charges. She'd have a criminal record, lose her job, lose everything. And the scandal would destroy Marcus's firm anyway. No one wants to do business with a man whose own daughter betrayed him. We sat in silence, trapped between impossible choices. There might be another way, I said slowly. An idea was forming, dark and calculated, but necessary. What if we let them think they're winning? Marcus looked at me sharply. What do you mean? Emma is accessing your files, feeding information to Castellano. What if you gave her something to access? Something that looks real but isn't. Understanding dawned in his eyes. False information. A fake proposal for Riverside. With numbers that look good on paper but wouldn't actually work. Margins that seem profitable but aren't. Investor lists that are outdated or wrong. I leaned forward. Let Castellano build his entire competing bid around bad information. And when the council sees it, they'll reject it immediately. And when my real proposal comes in, properly researched and viable, we'll win. Marcus stood up, pacing now, energy returning to his movements. But we need to be careful. The false information has to be believable enough that Emma doesn't question it. She won't question it, I said with certainty I didn't feel. She trusts that you trust her. She thinks she's smarter than both of us. Marcus stopped pacing and looked at me. This could backfire if she realizes what we're doing. Then we confront her with everything David found. We have evidence, Marcus. Bank statements, phone records, photographs. Enough to prove what she's done. I stood up and went to him. But this way, maybe we can save your company and teach her a lesson at the same time. And if it doesn't work, then we've lost nothing we haven't already lost. Marcus spent the next 3 days creating the perfect fake proposal. He worked in his office with the door locked, crafting documents that looked real but contained fatal flaws. Investor names that were slightly wrong. Financial projections that seemed solid until you dug deeper. Zoning variance requests that wouldn't quite meet city requirements. It has to be perfect, he kept saying, printing and reprinting pages. If one thing seems off, she'll get suspicious. On Thursday night, he left the completed fake proposal on his desk in an obviously accessible folder labeled Riverside, Final Proposal, Confidential. Then we went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, and waited. At 11:23 p.m., the security system logged an entry. Emma's code. She'd let herself into the main house. We lay in the darkness, Marcus's hand gripping mine so hard it hurt, and listened. The creak of the office door opening. The soft sounds of movement. The click of a phone camera over and over again. She was there for 17 minutes. I counted every one of them, each second an eternity. When the system logged her exit, Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding. She took it, the bait. Now we wait, I said, but waiting was agony. For the next week, we went through the motions of normal life. Family dinners, small talk, smiles that felt like masks. Emma seemed excited, energized, texting constantly on her phone. Planning her future, probably, the apartment downtown, the life she thought she was building. She had no idea she was building it on sand. The city council meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 7 p.m. Marcus had submitted his real proposal, the one Emma had never seen, 3 days earlier through his attorney. It was sealed, confidential, delivered directly to the City Planning Commission. On Monday afternoon, David called. Castellano just submitted his bid, he said, 2 hours ago. I have a contact in the city clerk's office who gave me a heads up. And my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice. It's a carbon copy of the fake proposal. Every number, every projection, every name. He didn't even bother changing the formatting. Marcus, who was listening on speakerphone, closed his eyes. The arrogance. There's more, David continued. He's bringing Emma to the council meeting tomorrow. Listed her as a consultant on his team. He's parading her around like a trophy. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. He's going to humiliate himself in front of the entire city council, and he's bringing our daughter down with him. She made her choice, Marcus said, but his voice was hollow. She knew what she was doing. After we hung up, Marcus and I sat in his office, the weight of tomorrow pressing down on us. In less than 24 hours, everything would come to light. Emma would realize what we'd done. What she'd done. The consequences would be real and irreversible. We could stop it, I said quietly. We could call her right now, tell her not to go. Marcus looked at me. And then what? She gets away with it? She learns that betrayal has no consequences as long as Mommy and Daddy bail her out. She's our daughter. She stopped being our daughter the moment she decided to destroy me. His voice broke on the last word, and I saw tears in his eyes. Victoria, I want to save her. God, I want to save her. But I don't know how to save someone from themselves. That night, Emma came over for dinner unannounced. She was glowing, practically vibrating with excitement. I have news, she said, kissing both our cheeks. Big news. We sat down at the dining table, and I served leftover lasagna with hands that shook slightly. Marcus poured wine with careful precision. So, Emma said, barely touching her food, I got an amazing opportunity. There's this developer, really successful guy, and he's asked me to consult on a major project. It's presentation tomorrow night at the city council, and he wants me there as part of his team. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I heard myself say. What kind of project? Commercial development. Huge piece of land on the riverside. It could be career-changing for me, Mom. Real recognition, not just fetching coffee at the agency. Marcus set down his wine glass with more force than necessary. Riverside, you said? Yeah, do you know it? Emma looked at him with such innocent curiosity that I wanted to scream. I might have heard something about it, Marcus said carefully. Competitive project, I imagine. Oh, definitely. But Richard, that's the developer, he's really confident. Says he has inside knowledge of what the city wants, what will really work. She smiled, that beautiful smile. I helped him with some of the research, actually. Used some of what I've learned from listening to you talk about your work all these years, Dad. The audacity, the absolute audacity of sitting there and telling him to his face that she'd used his own expertise to undermine him. Well, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm, I hope it goes well for you tomorrow. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. She reached over and squeezed his hand. You've always been my biggest supporter. Tuesday arrived like an execution date. Marcus and I got dressed in careful silence. He wore his best suit, the charcoal one he saved for important meetings. I chose a simple black dress and the pearls he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. Ready? He asked as we stood by the door. I wasn't ready. I would never be ready to watch my daughter's world collapse. But I nodded anyway. The city council chambers were packed. The Riverside project had attracted attention. It was one of the biggest development proposals the city had seen in years. I recognized several local reporters, business owners, community leaders. And there in the front row on the left side sat Richard Castellano. He was exactly as he'd looked in the photos, tall, distinguished, expensive suit, the kind of man who commanded attention just by existing. Next to him sat Emma. She was wearing a navy blue power suit I'd helped her pick out for job interviews. Her hair was pulled back in a professional bun. She looked confident, capable, like she belonged there. She was laughing at something Richard had said, her hand resting on the table near his. She hadn't seen us yet. We'd chosen seats near the back, partially obscured by a column. David Chapman sat 3 rows behind us, camera ready, documenting everything. Marcus and I had agreed we would watch in silence. We wouldn't interfere, wouldn't cause a scene. We would let the truth speak for itself. The council meeting began with routine business, permit approvals, zoning updates, community announcements. I barely heard any of it. My entire focus was on Emma, on the back of her head, on the way she kept glancing at Richard with something that looked like pride. Finally, the council president announced, "We'll now hear proposals for the Riverside Commercial Development Project. We have 2 bids. First, we'll hear from Castellano Development Group." Richard stood, smooth and confident. Emma stood with him, carrying a portfolio of materials. They approached the podium together, and I watched my daughter smile at the council like she'd already won. "Good evening," Richard began, his voice rich and assured. "I'm Richard Castellano, and this is Emma Patterson, my consulting partner on this project. We're here tonight to present what we believe is the ideal vision for the Riverside property." He clicked to his first slide, a rendering of the proposed development. It looked impressive, professional. Emma stood beside him, nodding at appropriate moments, the perfect picture of a young professional on the rise. Then Richard started going through the numbers, the projected costs, the expected revenue, the investor list, the zoning variance requests. And slowly, incrementally, I watched the council members' expressions change. The council president frowned, checking something on his tablet. The city planner leaned over to whisper to the finance director. A few members started taking notes, their faces skeptical. Richard kept talking, oblivious. Emma kept smiling, unaware. Mr. Castellano, the council president, interrupted. "I have some questions about your financial projections. These revenue estimates, they seem to be based on commercial lease rates that don't actually exist in our current market." Richard paused, glanced at his notes. "I assure you our research is thorough." "And this investor list," another council member chimed in. "3 of these firms don't actually do commercial development. One of them has been defunct for 2 years. I watched Emma's smile falter. She looked at Richard, confusion flickering across her face. "There must be some mistake in the documentation," Richard said, but his confidence was cracking. "If you'll give me a moment." "And the zoning variance you're requesting," the city planner said, his voice sharp now. "It violates the city's environmental protection ordinances that went into effect 6 months ago. This entire proposal doesn't comply with current regulations." The room had gone silent. Every eye was on Richard Castellano as he shuffled through his papers, his face reddening. Emma stood frozen beside him, her portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. We must have been working from outdated information," Richard stammered. "If we could have a brief recess to review." "Mr. Castellano," the council president said, and his tone had turned ice cold. "This is a formal proposal hearing, not a preliminary consultation. You submitted this bid as final and complete. Are you telling us you didn't properly vet your own numbers?" "Of course we vetted them." "My consultant," he turned to Emma, and I saw panic flash in his eyes. "Ms. Patterson assured me." Emma's face went white. "I only provided the information you asked for. The research came from—" She stopped mid-sentence. I watched the realization hit her in real time, saw her face transform from confusion to horror as she understood what had happened. Her eyes swept the room, searching, until they landed on Marcus and me sitting in the back. Our eyes met across the crowded chamber, hers filled with tears. Mine stayed dry. "I see," the council president said. "Well, this is highly irregular and frankly unprofessional. We'll move on to the second proposal. Mr. Marcus Patterson from Patterson Commercial Properties." Marcus stood. Every eye in the room shifted to him as he walked to the podium. Emma remained frozen at the front, Richard beside her. "Good evening," Marcus said, his voice steady and strong. "Thank you for your patience. I've spent 2 years researching the Riverside project, working with city planners, environmental consultants, and community stakeholders to develop a proposal that serves everyone's interests." He clicked to his first slide, and I could see immediately that everything was different. The council members leaned forward, engaged now. Marcus walked them through every detail, the phased development timeline that would minimize community disruption, the green space allocations that exceeded city requirements, the local hiring commitments, the infrastructure improvements. 20 years of experience and expertise on full display. This was the man Emma had betrayed, the father whose work she'd stolen and sold. And he was magnificent. I watched Emma watch her father, watched her realize what she'd done, who she'd hurt. Tears were streaming down her face now, smudging her carefully applied makeup. Richard had slunk back to his seat, his face ashen, his career crumbling around him. Marcus finished his presentation to genuine applause. The council president actually smiled and said, "Now that's a proposal. Well done, Mr. Patterson. We'll take this to vote, but I think I can safely say the outcome is favorable." "Thank you," Marcus said. He gathered his materials, walked back toward his seat, and passed Emma without even glancing at her. The council voted unanimously to approve Marcus's proposal and reject Castellano's. The meeting adjourned, and people began filing out, congratulating Marcus, shaking his hand. He accepted their praise with quiet dignity, but I could see the pain behind his eyes. Emma hadn't moved. She stood near the front of the chamber, like a statue, mascara-streaked, tears running down her face. Richard had already left, slipping out a side door the moment the vote concluded. He'd abandoned her, just like we knew he would. "Victoria," Marcus said quietly, "let's go. We can't just leave her here." "Yes, we can." His voice was hard. She made her choice. Let her live with it. But I couldn't. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies and the $87,000, she was still my daughter. I had carried her for 9 months. I couldn't just walk away. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight, and stepped outside. I walked down the aisle toward Emma. She saw me coming, and her face crumpled completely. "Mom." "Not here," I said quietly. "Outside. Now." I turned and walked out, not checking to see if she followed. But I heard her footsteps behind me, quick and stumbling. Marcus was waiting by our car, talking to David Chapman. When he saw Emma, he turned away. Emma and I stood in the parking lot under the streetlights. She was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Long enough." I kept my voice level detached. "I hired David to follow your father. He found you instead." "Mom, I can explain." "Can you?" I looked at her fully now, this stranger wearing my daughter's face. "Can you explain how you've been stealing from your father for almost a year? How you've been sleeping with a married man and selling him corporate secrets? How you asked us to co-sign a lease for an apartment you were going to buy with blood money?" "I didn't. It wasn't supposed to." She was crying harder now. "Richard said Dad's firm was too successful, that it wasn't fair, that we were just leveling the playing field." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare blame him for your choices. You're 24 years old, Emma. You have a college degree. You knew exactly what you were doing." "I made a mistake." "No. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or saying something hurtful in anger. What you did was calculated, deliberate, and sustained. For months, you sat at our table, ate our food, hugged your father, and stabbed him in the back. That's not a mistake. That's a betrayal." She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Mom, I'll make it right. I'll pay back the money. How?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "You made $87,000 selling your father's work to his competitor. That money is already spent or hidden. And even if you could pay it back, how do you repay the damage to his reputation? The deals he lost? The trust that's been broken?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. "I don't know, but I'll figure it out. Please don't give up on me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the little girl who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. The young woman I'd helped move into her dorm room. Both of us crying and laughing at the same time. But I also saw the woman who'd chosen money over family, who'd chosen a married man's attention over her father's love, who'd asked us to help her while actively destroying us. "I'm not giving up on you," I said finally. "But I'm also not saving you. Not this time." "What does that mean?" "It means you're an adult, and adults face consequences. Your father could press charges for corporate espionage. Richard's wife could sue you for alienation of affection. Your employer will fire you when this gets out, and it will get out. That's what it means. So you're just going to let my life fall apart?" "We didn't do this, Emma. You did." I took a breath, steadying myself. "But I will tell you this. If you want any chance of rebuilding your relationship with us, you need to own what you've done. Not make excuses. Not blame Richard. Not play the victim. You take responsibility, you face the consequences, and you figure out how to be a better person." "And if I do that—" Her voice was small, childlike. "Will you forgive me?" The question hung in the night air between us. Would I? Could I? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Ask me in a year. Or 5. Or 10. But right now you need to go. Your father and I need time, and you need to figure out who you want to be." Emma stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, waiting for me to change my mind, to pull her into my arms the way I'd done 1,000 times before, to tell her it would all be okay. But I didn't move, and eventually she turned and walked to her car, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the darkness, and felt something inside me break and mend at the same time. Marcus was beside me suddenly, his hand finding mine. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I will be." We stood there together in the parking lot, David having quietly left to give us privacy, and I realized something. We'd survived. Not intact, not unscathed, but we'd survived. "The Riverside Project," I said. "You really did it." "We did it," he corrected. "If you hadn't hired David, if you hadn't pushed for the truth, I'd be bankrupt right now. Emma and Castellano would have stolen everything. What happens now? With Richard?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "David's already submitted evidence to the state licensing board. Castellano will lose his developer's license, probably face criminal charges. His wife filed for divorce this afternoon. Apparently David made sure she knew everything. And Emma. Her employer received an anonymous tip about her activities. She'll be fired by Friday." He paused. "I didn't press criminal charges. I couldn't. But David made it clear to her that if she ever tries something like this again, the evidence will go straight to the district attorney." We got in the car and drove home in silence. The house looked the same as always. Warm lights in the windows, perfectly maintained lawn. The guest house dark and empty now. But everything had changed. The next few weeks were strange. Marcus threw himself into the Riverside Project, working 18-hour days again. But this time I understood it was his way of healing. Building something real, something honest, something Emma couldn't touch. I went back to teaching. Not full-time, just volunteering at the local elementary school. Reading to kindergartners and helping with art projects. Being around children who still believed in goodness, who hadn't learned how to betray yet, was balm for my wounded heart. We didn't hear from Emma directly. She moved out of the guest house while we were gone one day, taking only what she'd bought with her own money, or at least, what she'd bought before Richard. The key she'd had since she was 16 was left on the kitchen counter with no note. But I heard things. Through friends. Through David's occasional updates. Emma had been fired, as Marcus predicted. She'd moved into a small studio apartment in a less expensive neighborhood. She was working as a waitress at a diner, the kind of job she would have looked down on a year ago. Richard Castellano lost everything. His license, his business, his marriage. Last I heard, he'd moved to Arizona to live with his brother. His wife got the house, the cars, and full custody of their 3 children. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself standing in Emma's old room in the guest house, looking at the things she'd left behind. A stuffed bear from her childhood, photo albums from high school, a dried corsage from her senior prom, evidence of the girl she used to be, before greed and bad choices rewrote her story. Marcus caught me there one night, 3 months after the city council meeting. "Still thinking about her?" he asked from the doorway. "Always," I admitted. "She's our daughter. I'll never stop thinking about her." He came and stood beside me, his arm around my waist. "David said she's doing better. Working 2 jobs now. Living within her means. She hasn't contacted Castellano." "How do you know that?" "I asked him to keep tabs on her, just to make sure she's safe." His voice was rough. "I'm still angry, Victoria. I don't know if I'll ever not be angry, but she's still my kid." I leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Do you think she'll ever reach out?" "I don't know, and I don't know if I want her to. Not yet." He paused. "But maybe someday, when she's done figuring out who she is, without us propping her up." 6 months after the city council meeting, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter, delivered through regular mail. The return address was Emma's studio apartment. I sat at the kitchen table for 10 minutes, just staring at it, before I finally opened it. "Dear Mom and Dad, I know I don't have the right to write to you. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to try. I've spent the last 6 months thinking about what I did, not making excuses, just really thinking about it, about how I hurt you, about who I became. I was jealous. That sounds stupid, but it's true. I had everything. A family who loved me, parents who supported me, opportunities most people dream about. But it never felt like mine. It felt like yours. Like I was living in your shadow, playing by your rules, being the daughter you wanted instead of figuring out who I was. That doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. But I want you to know I understand now that I was destroying the wrong thing. I should have been brave enough to build my own life honestly instead of tearing down yours out of some twisted need to prove myself. Richard didn't make me do anything. I made my own choices and they were terrible. I hurt the 2 people who loved me most in the world, and I'll have to live with that forever. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking to see you. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on becoming someone better, someone you might be proud of someday, even if it's from a distance. I'm working 2 jobs, a diner and a bookstore. I'm saving money the right way. I started seeing a therapist to figure out why I thought any of what I did was okay. I cut off all contact with Richard. I'm trying to be the person I should have been all along. I love you both. I'm sorry for everything. And I hope someday, maybe years from now, we can talk again. Emma." I read the letter 3 times before Marcus came home. When he did, I handed it to him without a word. He read it slowly, his jaw working, his eyes wet. When he finished, he set it down on the table and stared at it for a long time. "What do you think?" I asked finally. I think it's a start," he said. "Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a start. Do we write back?" He thought about it. "Not yet. Let her keep working on herself. Let her prove that this isn't just words, but actual change. Then maybe, in time." I nodded. It was the right answer, even if it hurt. A year after the city council meeting, Marcus's Riverside project broke ground. It was a beautiful autumn day, crisp and clear, and the ceremony was attended by city officials, investors, and community members. They asked Marcus to say a few words, and he talked about perseverance, integrity, and building things that last. I stood in the crowd, watching him, and felt proud, not just of the project, but of how we'd survived the worst betrayal of our lives and come out stronger. As we were leaving, I saw her, just for a moment, standing at the edge of the crowd. Emma, wearing a simple dress and carrying a bookstore tote bag, watching her father from a distance. Our eyes met, and she gave me a small, tentative smile, not asking for anything, just acknowledging. I smiled back, not a full embrace, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement, recognition that she was there, that she was trying, that maybe someday there would be a path back to each other. Then she turned and walked away, and I let her go. Marcus hadn't seen her. I didn't mention it. Some bridges take years to rebuild. Some wounds need time to heal properly without rushing. And sometimes, the greatest love you can show someone is letting them face the consequences of their choices and trusting them to grow from it. People ask me sometimes if I regret hiring that private investigator, if I wish I'd never found out, never known, lived in blissful ignorance while Emma destroyed us from within. The answer is no. The truth is always better than the lie, even when it's painful, even when it breaks your heart, even when it means losing someone you love for a while, or maybe forever. I learned that my daughter was capable of terrible things, but I also learned that Marcus and I were stronger than I'd known, that our marriage could survive a betrayal that would have destroyed many others, that sometimes the hardest thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to save them from themselves. And I learned that motherhood doesn't end when your child disappoints you. It just changes shape. It becomes harder, more complicated, filled with grief and distance and the faint hope that someday, maybe, things could be different. Closing reflection. If you're listening to this story and you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to know you will survive it. Not unchanged, not without scars, but you will survive. And if you're the one who's done the betraying, if you've hurt people who loved you because you were chasing something you thought you deserved, it's not too late to change. It's not too late to take responsibility, to do the work, to become someone better. Forgiveness isn't guaranteed. Reconciliation isn't promised. But growth, redemption, becoming a better version of yourself, that's always possible if you're willing to do the hard work. Would you have done what I did? Would you have set the trap, exposed your own daughter, let her face the consequences? Or would you have confronted her directly, given her a chance to confess? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you process your own pain or understand your own family drama, please share it. Sometimes we all need to know we're not alone in the hard things. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the truth might hurt, but lies hurt worse in the end.